The prevailing narrative frames withdrawal from the Middle East as a sign of American weakness or an admission that the war on Iran was lost. The strategic reality is the opposite. Staying committed to this theater has become a net negative for U.S. global positioning, draining capital and military focus needed for great power competition against China. This brief reframes withdrawal not as retreat, but as a calculated power move, a necessary pivot to reallocate resources where they yield actual geopolitical leverage. The cost of the current stalemate is no longer just financial, it is an opportunity cost that threatens U.S. primacy in Asia. To understand why this shift matters, we must look at the friction between Washington and Tel Aviv over the last 2 years. For decades, American policy in the region was tethered to a specific set of assumptions, that regime change through pressure or force would eventually yield stability, and that Israel's security needs were synonymous with America's own strategic imperatives. That alignment has fractured. In early 2025, following President Trump's second inauguration, U.S. strategy diverged sharply from the preferences of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for preemptive military strikes against nuclear facilities. While Jerusalem prepared forces for air campaigns targeting Iran's infrastructure to prevent a bomb, the White House initiated a diplomatic pivot in March 2025. This marked a decisive departure from maximum pressure toward a phased approach combining sanctions with talks. The administration sent a formal letter to Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei proposing negotiations within 2 months. This was not a desperate plea born of weakness. It was the opening salvo of an exit strategy designed by those who understood that further escalation in this theater would only deepen American overstretch. The objective shifted from regime change or nation building to what can be best described as strategic disengagement. The operational reality on the ground confirms this transition, even if public rhetoric still hints at containment goals under Secretary Hegseth. Directives narrowed to specific capacity-stripping measures, achieving air supremacy by August 2026 and targeting nuclear and missile infrastructure rather than pursuing long-term occupation or democracy promotion. The CIA supported limited Kurdish incursions, but the overarching strategy explicitly avoided full-scale ground wars. This was a conscious rejection of past quagmires in favor of high-leverage strikes followed by rapid disengagement. Quick resource note. I keep a curated set of Amazon search links in the description for books, gear, and tools relevant to this channel's topics. Some are affiliate links, so I may earn a commission at no extra cost to you. Please consider supporting the channel by using those links if you find something useful. The culmination of this new logic arrived with the leaked framework agreement released in August 2026. This document codifies the shift from active conflict to managed de-escalation, though it does so on terms that would have been unacceptable a decade ago. The deal mandates an end to all U.S. military operations within 30 days and requires forces to withdraw from the proximity of Iran, effectively ending active hostilities. In exchange for lifting naval blockades which allowed immediate oil exports and releasing $30 billion in frozen assets with a total estimated reconstruction fund of $300 billion, Washington secured only a temporary 60-day guarantee on commercial transit through the Strait of Hormuz. When viewed through the lens of incentives and power dynamics, this trade-off reveals its true nature as an exit strategy rather than a victory lap. The numbers tell the story. Tehran received immediate economic relief with $30 billion in assets returned to them, alongside a massive reconstruction fund that stabilizes their economy for years. Washington, conversely, accepted a temporary transit fix lasting only 60 days before negotiations would resume or default back to confrontation. This asymmetry proves that the United States was not bargaining for long-term dominance. It was purchasing time and space to leave the region without triggering a total collapse of regional order that could drag American forces in again later. The critical question remains, why accept such limited gains? The answer lies entirely in the China imperative, which has become the defining challenge of this century. For decades, U.S. naval assets and fiscal capital were tethered to the Middle East, treating it as a primary theater where stability was paramount for oil flows and regional allies. However, maintaining that posture requires constant military presence, intelligence overhead, and diplomatic bandwidth. By securing a temporary transit window and ending active combat in 30 days, the U.S. frees up naval assets and fiscal capital previously tied to the Middle East for deployment in the Indo-Pacific theater against China. This is not about abandoning allies. It is about prioritizing where American power can actually be decisive. Fighting Iran on multiple fronts while trying to counter Chinese expansion in Asia creates a strategic contradiction that dilutes U.S. capabilities everywhere. The cost of continued engagement in this stalemate is an opportunity cost that threatens primacy elsewhere. Withdrawing from the Middle East allows for the concentration of force where it yields actual geopolitical leverage, securing trade routes, reinforcing alliances with Japan and South Korea, and maintaining technological superiority against a peer competitor. The strategic pivot recognizes that the era of unlimited resource commitment to regional conflicts is over. The United States cannot fight every proxy war while simultaneously preparing for great power competition. Accepting a deal that gives Tehran tangible economic relief but ends direct combat allows Washington to stop bleeding resources into a quagmire where regime change is no longer feasible or desired by key stakeholders, including Israel itself. This withdrawal transforms the Middle East from a primary theater of conflict into a secondary constraint on American power. For the curious observer, this shift clarifies why the U.S. is pulling back, despite ongoing tensions with Iran or regional allies like Israel. The withdrawal isn't a surrender, it's an asset reallocation. By prioritizing great power competition over Middle East entanglement, America seeks to preserve its ability to shape global outcomes in Asia and Europe, rather than being consumed by conflicts that offer diminishing returns on investment. The lesson here is one of strategic discipline. Leaders must be willing to accept short-term friction or the appearance of weakness if it secures long-term positioning against a true peer rival. The United States has chosen to trade immediate control over regional dynamics for the capacity to compete where the future balance of power will ultimately be decided. Thanks for watching all the way to the end. I am a one-person team working hard to make each video better than the last. Subscribe if you found value. It is the best way to show support. Drop a comment with your biggest takeaway. See you in the next video.